Hi everyone, this is our third video regarding unit testing. In the previous videos, in the first one, we've reviewed how to start with unit testing and the basic usage of unit testing in a kind of a clean room scenario. In the second video, we showed how to create the tests that will run on migrated code and test the migrated database. And in this one, we're going to elaborate on that. But first, let's review the second video again. So we created a test to test the order CSV program, which creates a CSV file, and we wanted to make sure that it's created correctly. We have learned about the setup method, which is identified by the assembly initialize attribute above it. This is like the program main of testing. This will run once when the test project is loaded, and then will be used by the rest of the test. So here we'll put things that are the same for all the tests, like which version user setting is configured to the global default, it will load the INI, and it will suppress the dialogues, so no unneeded message boxes or anything like that will appear while we work. Next, we created our test, which is designed again to test the order CSV code. It starts by deleting the original file and making sure that it's not there. Then it runs the program, and afterwards it makes sure that the file exists. And then it reads the values, the lines from the files, making sure that there are 6 lines, and making sure that the actual numeric value that you wanted to test, which is in our case the order total, has the correct values. So that's what we've done in the previous video. This video is going to make that into a bit more practical solution, because this test is extremely fragile. It depends on the orders that exist for this customer in the database. Now, if someone would add a new order for this customer, this test would fail. If someone would change the parameters of an existing order, this test would fail. So we want to make this test more robust. Now, there are several approaches. The one which is most commonly used is not even use the database at all. It's use some kind of a memory table. I wouldn't use that approach for the migrated code or for existing code, because a lot of times in existing applications that are being migrated, there's a very deep connection between the database and the code. You have views, you have stored procedures, you have direct SQLs, and creating a test that doesn't use the database will not be able to use all of those and will actually not test the reality of your code. One might call this more integration tests than unit tests because it tests several items combined, but I'm okay with that, still using it like that. But on the other hand, I don't want the fragileness of using existing data. So what I will do is I will create mock data for my test in the real database. So I'll have the benefit of using views, stored procedures, and everything, but my data will still be relevant for the test, thus being less fragile. So to do that, we'll start by setting up a mock customer that will work in our test. So previously the customer ID was ALFKI. We'll create our own customer ID. So we'll say const string test customer ID. We'll call it like that. Okay. And whenever we used ALFKI, I will replace it with that. Cool. Then we'll start by deleting the existing orders that exist for this customer, making sure that we have a clean slate when we start our testing. So we'll define the orders table. And we'll delete all the orders of these customers. Good. Next thing we want to do, we want to insert a new row to the orders, so we can use that and make sure that the CSV file contains that row. Let's run it, and first of all see what it takes to insert a row to the database. So I'm running the application, I'm going to the tables definition, and I'm going to create a new row. And I'll give it a customer ID. I'll try to leave and I'll get errors regarding the date. So I need to make sure that the dates have valid value. Okay, cool. So I'll do again, and I'll get to January 1st, 1901. Okay, and now I get this error. Now I'm specifically running this with this error because you already have this test project and you probably run into the same error. And it's actually a bug in the configuration of the test project. If you look at the code behind it, we'll go over to the orders entity, we can see that it is expected that the order ID will be of type identity in the database. And we can also see that it's stated as DB read only. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is one of the coolest properties. It actually says that this column will only take part in select statements and not in inserts and updates. So it counts of that value to be completely calculated by the database. But since in our database, we can see that the order ID column is not defined as identity, then the application cannot treat it as identity. So let's make it identity false, or we can actually just remove this part. And let's take away the DB read only because we do want to insert values and use them. So we'll put it here, run it again. Let's try again to insert a value. We can see that the previous row was created, so let's first of all delete it. And we'll do a test it. We'll give it a number and use 1901. And we have created the row successfully. So this is how we created the test data. Let's do the same thing from code, because eventually we want to test it from code. So go back to our test. Okay. Just to repeat, we deleted the file, we deleted the rows in the orders table. Now we want to insert a row to the orders table. So we say o.insert. And we say o.order ID is equal to some IDs that I can use. In this case, I'll just say 1 because I know it doesn't exist in the database. o.order customer ID is equal to test customer ID. And we'll just set the rest of the values that we saw that we needed, which are the dates. Now we can set all the values that exist in the table. I recommend against it. I recommend setting the bare minimum that are required for the integrity checks to run, but not more than that because it would just become more code that you need to maintain. Okay, so let's do this. Let's run this test now, which obviously will fail, but I want to at least make sure that we have this row in the database afterwards. So the row has failed, obviously. The file wasn't found. Let's run it. Just have a look at the table. If we have the table, the values that we wanted, the rows that we wanted for testing. Cool. So, okay, great. So we have the test ID customer. We have the definition over here. We have all of that. One might ask, why did the test fail on finding the file? Because it should have created such a file. Let's have a look at the directory and see the files that was created. And we see the files that was created was test I. So, for those of you who already guessed the problem, the customer ID field, we'll go to its definition, if type customer ID is 5 characters long, and test ID has 6 characters long, and we have failed on that one. Great test. So let's go ahead and change this to be test ID and run the test again. Cool. Now the test has failed again, obviously, but hopefully on something else. Cannot insert duplicate key into the duplicate order, which is again cool, because remember previously we inserted the row with test I. Okay. Now we changed it to TST ID and we're deleting the row for TST ID, but the row with test I still exists. So let's go delete it. This is a one-time exercise that we need to do. And it's fun, and during the demo we run into every possible scenario of anything that can go wrong, which will hopefully make your life easier when you will start doing this yourself. And so let's run the test again. Great. Now it failed because it isn't expecting any value there, which is correct. We don't have any value there. Let's fix our test to adjust to what's going on. We actually, in this case, when the customer has an order without any details in it, we expect him to have only one row. Okay. And that row should have a 0.00 in the expected values. Okay. So the test that we have right now actually verifies that an order without details should have a 0 value and 1 row. And the test was successful. Cool. So The advantage of this test over the previous test is that it sets up everything it needs when it starts operating. Okay, so it's not dependent on pretty much anything else. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to create more tests to take care of more scenarios and test more scenarios, and you'll see how this becomes easier from one test to the other. So as I said in the beginning of the second video, the biggest problem with unit testing is writing the first test, and we've done that now. Now we can leverage from that and learn other cool things and make this easier to write. So next, let's just improve on this a bit and let's create a bit more tests that we care about. The one thing we should do is have a better name for the test. Test method 1 is not a good name. This one, let's say, is test is a customer with one order and no details has 0 in amount, in sum. Just one way of doing that. Okay, give the test any names that you like. I'll be honest with you, most of my tests are called test 1, 2, 3. But this is the way you should do it, but for some reason I don't live up to that big standard. Okay, cool. So let's have a look here. Okay, we can see that we have this code, cool. And let's add another, let's make sure that this test run, just to be safe side, run test, build successful, test run, we're happy. Great. Next test we want to do is let's make sure that it has some order details and see that we get some data around that as well. So we'll copy this test and let's say test one product, okay, per order. Now this is becoming a bit cumbersome. This entire code here that checks the file exists in these two cases, which is too much, and I don't like it. So let's refactor it. Even tests are code, and as such, they should be refactored to be easier to use and easier to follow. So we can say here, okay, cool, edit, refactor, extract method. Okay, and we'll call that method assert CSV result. Okay. Now it gets the file name, and let's say it also needs to get the number of expected values. Okay, so let's say int expected lines, and we want to get an array of the values, so we'll say params object array expected values. String array actually, not object array. String array expected values. So when I call it, I'll send 1 for the expected lines, okay, and the arrays that I've created over here as the values that I expect to have. So I'll delete this, and hopefully this code should work. Second method will touch base on in S. We didn't touch it. Okay, cool. So let's just run the test. Okay, and unselect the tests, and we can see that it runs correctly. Our test still works. Great. So now the entire assertion part of this, the entire test of what's going on, was reduced to one line of code, which is easier to use, and we'll use it quite a lot. Now in terms of code practices, I prefer to put these kind of lines of code at the end. I like my test to start with the actual text that I care about and then with helpful code around it. So now instead of using this entire text over here, I can just use this method. Again, reducing the code and making it easier to read and easier to follow. Cool. Next thing we want to do, we can also start saying, no, let's not do anything yet. Let's take care of that later. So we want to create one product here. Okay. So we'll take the order detail. Order detail. Okay. And in that order detail, we'll say, again, delete where order ID is equal to 1. Okay, I want to make sure that that doesn't exist there. OD where order ID is equal to 1, like this, yeah, doesn't land here. And then we'll do OD dot insert, and say od.orderID is equal to 1. Again, this is the same ones that we used here, here, and here. It's the order IDs that we're using for the test. od.productID. I'm not sure if I care. I don't. So I'll say unit price is equal to 10. od.quantity is equal to 5. Okay. And by that, I expect my result to be 50. Let's run this test. Cool. Let's run all of our tests. Let's run all of the tests. Cool. And this one has failed now. Interesting thing though, you can see that the first test that runs to the database takes 600 milliseconds, the second one takes only 7 milliseconds, and that is because it doesn't need to connect to the database again. Okay. Now over here we failed on the test that customer with one order and no details has 0 sum in it. It's the first test, and it's actually correct to fail because over here we inserted an order ID with 1, and that order ID wasn't cleaned up properly in terms of order detail. Okay. So we should say here, okay, var od equals new northwind models orders and order detail, sorry. Say od delete order ID is equal to 1. And again, it doesn't need a lambda. For some reason, I'm used to putting a lambda here. So let's run all the tests again and see that it will run faster and better, hopefully. Cool. Now, cool. We've seen this, it's working. And it's fun, but still a bit too much code. The entire this part and this part is kind of repeating itself between all of our tests. Too much code, we hate too much code. So let's create a method out of it. Let's make it easier to figure out and find and do anything with it. So first thing we want to do, you can take this entire code because it's going to be it's consistent to both of them. Okay, and let's refactor it. Extract method, create order with ID 1. Okay. So now I have this helper method here, and I can delete my code over here as well. Goes all the way to here, and say create order with ID 1. And now it's simpler. Okay, I think I did that. Okay, cool. And I'll put that in the bottom again. According to my practices, I prefer them to be at the bottom. So I have tested customer with one order, okay. Tested customer with a product, one product per order is okay. Run both tests. Everything runs, everything's configured, and it's easier to read. Cool. Now let's do one more thing of reuse. There are some things here that every test will start with, or at least every test in this class will start with. Create order with ID 1 is not necessarily the case because maybe we want sometimes to see what happens to a customer without an order, but we can still say that this happens for every test. Now, if you want to define some initialized code that will run for all the tests in the specific test class, which is test order CSV, there's an attribute for that. Previously, we used assembly initialize for the entire test suite. We can now use test initialize, and that will run before every test in this specific class. Test init. Let's just build it and see if it likes it. So far we haven't changed anything. We want to make sure that the tests are still running. Cool. And then we'll move this code from there. Okay. And we'll do the same for the first one. And now it's actually complaining that it doesn't know the file name because we haven't kept it, which is cool. We can keep it as a static over here, or even as a string, file name, and we can set it in our test init, because we know that this will run before every test, so the file name will have a valid value. Let's build it and see that it runs. Cool. And now we can make it even smaller because we don't really need the file name over here. So the assert CSV result can actually know the file name because, again, it's defining the scope of the class. So I can remove it from here and change it from being static to just being a method. So now it's okay, less parameters to send, and our testing scenario is much easier. So suddenly the first test became 2 lines, the second test became a few more lines, but those lines kind of make sense. And let's add another test over here to test what happens if we have let's say that I want to see what happens if we have discount. Okay. And then I'll say quantity, and I can say od.discount is equal to 7. And the spec would tell me that I expect to get here 43. Let's see if that works. Cool. So you can see how we're starting to test the actual functionality of the code, and that's cool, and we'll use that a lot when we move forward. So far we've seen how we can use mock data instead of real data while still leveraging the power of the database to help us, and that's great. And we can see how we can create several tests and simplify the test by using the same refactoring method we would use when we write our own code. We'll create helper method, we'll use the test initialize to make sure that this code runs before every test, and we can enjoy that and get a very clear, fluent way of testing. The only one last thing that I want to add to this video is one common problem that happens when testing migrated code and how it is solved. We are calling the program migrated program orders CSV. And when migrated code operates and you call a program out of the blue, and this is certainly out of the blue, before doing that it will execute the onStart of the application class. Okay? Just like in Magic back in the days, if you would do F7 to a program, it would execute the onStart of the main program. And we used to solve that with many different ways, like run mode and other things that are out there. But we need to take that into consideration when we are running tests. Okay, we want to make sure that the main program would not run in the same way. Now, one way of doing that is just to set the run mode to simulate an F7 if you want to think like the old days. You can do that again in the assembly setup, but I want to offer another idea of doing that. But first, let's simulate the problem. Let's go to our solution, to the application class, and let's put an onStart over here. Okay, and let's do an external. Let's say we have some important init code, and then like a message box. Welcome. Okay, let's run the code first of all as an application. We get the welcome, and we're happy with it. But when we run our tests, we'll be much less happy with that welcome. Run the tests, and we'll start getting many welcomes. That will slow down the testing, which will make it less fun. We actually get just one, which is interesting. I expected to get more, probably some kind of flags that we set that prevented it from coming more, but it's still one too many. Okay, and now one might ask, first of all, how did I get the message box with welcome where we disabled them using the command disable everything? Well, just to clarify, we used this one. Opa, get back. In this code we said suppress dialogues. Why didn't it suppress the welcome dialog? And so the welcome dialog over here, we're using system Windows Forms, which is obviously outside of my control, so I cannot really disable it. Now, the equivalence of that might be in your code doing something very expensive, like sending an email when the application starts, or showing a message box using the call DLL or UDF, which was also used in many times. What I recommend to do in this case is to add a static member saying public static void bool I'm running in test mode. Okay, and then only execute this code if I'm not running in test mode. Okay, it's a basic solution, it's a simple solution, but it's an important solution because the biggest problems that you have with tests are setup. And if you start testing a migrated application, if you get someone new to help you with that, he's not aware of everything that goes on in the onStart task prefix of main program, if we think of magic terms, and he won't necessarily know what to remove and what not to. Only you, as the application expert, would know exactly which lines can be commented out and are not relevant for each and every run. So I would recommend using this, and of course, setting that value in our test to Northwind application I'm running in test mode equals true. And now when we run our test, that code that was ifed out, opted out, would not run, and our test will run fast without any disturbance. Cool. So, questions so far? No? Cool. So this has been a video about taking test on migrated code to the next level. The key points here were mocking data, okay, where we used mock data instead of real data, which allows this test to be executed again and again and again, expecting the same results no matter who changed what in the database. The second key point here was refactor the test to make them easy to read and easy to run, like this one. Run the CSV report, make sure that it has one line and that's the value in it. Expect one line and have this value, or expect one line and have this value in it. And the third important topic was how to disable the application on start code in the scenario of testing, which is a ridiculously simple solution to a problem that troubles many people. In the next video, I'll show you how we use everything we've done here to refactor the code and get better code out of it. Thank you for watching, and hope we'll get to do the next one soon.